Hey everyone, I'm Jessi Hempel. I'm host of LinkedIn's editorial podcast, Hello Monday, and I am here, as I am every Wednesday afternoon, with our awesome team. I have our contributor, Michaela Greer. Hey, Michaela. And our producer, Sarah Storm. Hey, Sarah.
Hello.
And we have so many of our friends here in the chat. I always love those few minutes before we jump online when I get to start to see who's there. I feel like, Jason, you're always there, like right on time. Andrew, too. So we had a great episode this week. I'm just going to say this week we on the podcast, which dropped Monday, if you're just joining us and if you've not checked out the podcast, you can find it anywhere you listen to podcasts. Hello Monday. This week's episode was on digital body language. And we actually ran this episode because a listener wrote to me and said, you know, I just read this book by this woman, and I feel like it's exactly what I need to know right now about work. Erica's work on digital body language actually applies no matter what you do and in whatever time you work in, right? It's about how we present ourselves in all of the ways apart from physical presence. But of course, in this past year, it suddenly felt like an emergency that we get this part of our work life right. Wouldn't you say, guys?
Absolutely. Because there's no like physical body language except for the rare occasion where you might be in the office.
Right. There's a lot of doing this, of looking at each other through screens, typing to each other, and through those interactions, trying to figure out how to be clear, to be understood, and maybe the hardest part of all, to understand other people. I mean, it seems so simple, you all, but it's so complicated. We began this episode, like the day that I was actually supposed to speak to Erica, I had this bizarre interaction with my manager. Now, folks, my manager's a friend. In fact, I don't know, he might even be in the chat right now. It's a guy named Dan Roth, and like a really great guy. We have a great working relationship, but we haven't seen a lot of each other in the last year and a half. In fact, at the time that I was interviewing Erica, I don't think I had seen him at all in a year and a half. And he had sent me a message the day before, and that message had been, it was forwarding along another email, and it was a sentence that could be read straight or could be read sarcastically, like, glad we know this, right? Emoji face. And I read it and I said, okay, glad we know this, right? Sarcastic? Glad we know this, right? Oh, literal? And I just really didn't know. And so I was trying to figure out how to respond. And I got so caught up in trying to figure that out and decode that y'all, I just didn't respond to him at all. And then a day went by and my heart started racing. Have you ever had that feeling, like your heart's racing? And then I finally wrote back, and I'm not going to tell you what I said. You're going to have to listen to the episode for that. But listen, I am not the only one that has this problem. My guess is, Michaela and Sarah, this kind of applies to the way that you lead your work life too.
100%. And while we talk about that, go ahead and rate your own digital communication on a scale, like your confidence in it. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 is like emojis make me cry. I always use too many exclamation points. And 10 is like my GIF/GIF game is super strong. And I am the leader in digital communications in my workspace. Michaela, how does it feel for you?
I think this struck home in many ways because, like Jessi said, we're all working from home. A lot of us maybe haven't even met our coworkers, and so you're trying to figure out this person without having the context clues of, oh, I know Jessi, so I know this is what she really means. And it also brought up some feelings when I worked during undergrad. I remember I used to put periods to end my sentence, which I didn't think was a big deal, and everyone there was like, "Why are you so mad?" And I'm like, "This is just the way we're supposed to write, I think." So really just being open enough to say, hey, I'm feeling tension here if you do meet that person, or, is everything okay? Or just if you really just don't understand, just say, hey, what do you mean by this, is very enlightening. So yes, this was a great episode for me and very timely.
Digital communication makes me so anxious, you guys. So, I mean, what doesn't, right? It's me, but like so anxious that sometimes it's really hard for me to reply to emails. I'm an effusive exclamation mark user. I think I'm getting better at emojis, and that is entirely because I have nibblings and I just sort of follow their lead a little bit. Like I listen to like 12-year-olds who seem to have a much easier time understanding how emojis need to work. Anybody who seems to be like fresher into the emoji scene than me.
And we're starting to see people
great.
populate their ratings, and I'm not going to read them yet. I want more ratings in there before we start to read them.
Okay.
But I also want to say we're not just talking about when you use emojis or what you write, right? Digital communication is so much more than that. And the reason why we're talking about it at all is because we are talking increasingly on these digital platforms, right? How is eye contact supposed to work on Zoom? When do you have your camera on versus when do you have it off? Has anybody had the experience where you have your camera on all day and by the end of the day, you feel the least connected you have ever felt from other people, despite the fact that you've been looking at them all day? I know that's experience I have.
I've been asked to do audio only meetings by people who experience incredible Zoom fatigue.
Yeah.
I'm curious to actually hear about what you think about eyeline, because like I know that I'm looking directly at my camera right now and I probably look more like I'm directly engaging, but then I want to see your faces and now I'm looking at your faces and I'm not looking at my camera, and it's really like, do you struggle with that? Because it really messes me up like a little bit every day.
I don't struggle with that. I just don't try to do that. I understand that if you want to feel like I'm looking at you, I should look directly at my camera, which I am doing right now. But if I'm really thinking about communicating with you, then I need to stop thinking about looking at my camera and focus on communicating with you, right?
Yeah.
Let's get some of these comments in. Okay, so in terms of how people are doing, like, it's interesting. I kind of thought we would have a lot of people at one end of the spectrum or the other, but Michaela, Sarah, I don't see that. I see people like more in the middle, right?
Yes. I don't know if everybody's being cautious.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Andrew's very interesting. 7 or 8, but communicating with 4s and 5s. Got 5 and 6. 7
and 7.
Yeah.
Deborah.
Yep. A lot of great comments. I want to come back up and grab. I want to grab this from Deborah, because Deborah, I want you to say more. Common sense is not always common practice, right? Enjoying the podcast while on break before coaching on Zoom. Gently using hands is a practice I adopted in the past years of Zoom-only coaching. Tell us a little bit more about how you use your hands when you're on Zoom and what is different about how that differs from when you're in physical space with people.
I'm just now thinking about my hands and the role they could play in a screen.
Yeah, I don't know. I always try to wave and I forget. Yeah.
It's a little bit distracting, right? Or even body language, right? And how you dress when you're on Zoom. Those are things that I think for me, I went through a little bit of a wave over the course of the pandemic where at the beginning I didn't think about it enough. And then I went through an extended period where I thought about it, I would almost say too much, a distracting amount of time. And now I've backed off that and I'm not thinking about it as much anymore. Beth says, I have a cool device called a PlexiCam that puts my webcam in the center of my screen.
Yeah.
That I have not heard of. I should, because I'm a tech person, but I've not heard of that. Have you guys?
I have not, but it sounds super cool. And that it just sounds like a better experience for both the person on the side who has the computer and the people that they're dealing with.
Okay, and so Ryan says he missed the question, so he didn't give his answer. Of course, Ryan, we always want your answer, so let me repeat the question. Sarah, you go ahead.
So is how confident are you in your digital communication? I threw it in the chat, but Ryan has another follow-up to Deborah. I use hands a lot, particularly when I agree with something being said, but I don't interrupt the insight being shared. So I'm also going to put the second question to you. Like, what does that look like? And Ryan says he's an 8 in terms of confidence. Deborah says she uses her hands one at a time to show that I am a whole body. So that you stop seeming like you're a head on a screen. And because we can see part of your hand, we're seeing, I get it. I think I get it.
I really like that. I also I do like that the hand over heart bit. So I'd be very curious to know if you're in the chat right now, do you use the emojis that are on Zoom? And I know Microsoft Teams has a version of this too, whether it's the heart emoji or the hand emoji or the raising hand emoji. The larger question here is, how do you get attention without speaking on a video screen in a positive and productive way? And those emojis are one way to do it.
Marissa has another. Michaela, you want to grab this one?
Sure. Hands on screen, thumbs up, down, flat, neutral. ASL applause.
Ah.
And let's see. What else?
And Deborah says, and my goodbye includes a namaste. Her hands below my chin.
Nice.
Love that one.
Very cool. So, will you grab Ryan's too as we're going?
Sure. I give a thumbs up or clap visibly or put my hand over ear, and we use emojis in our WebEx a lot at my company. Andrew says, there are emojis on Zoom? Yes, they're under the reaction feature. Get your Zoom game up, Andrew.
It does lead me to think too, just about how like one thing I think a lot about is how do you make room in a Zoom context when it comes to digital body language to include people who don't naturally speak up. Emojis are one way to do that. But I'm curious how many people, like one thing that I try to do, because you wouldn't know it because I'm always the one who starts this conversation, but I often find it difficult to speak at meetings. I get all in my head about what I have to say and whether it's important and whether I should contribute it. So I have a little personal challenge to myself if I'm jumping into a meeting with a big group of people to try to make a comment in the first 5 minutes in the chat feature. So I'm curious if anybody else uses the chat feature in that way to try to jumpstart the conversation, be involved in a positive way.
Sorry for calling you out, Andrew. But yes, Jessi, to your question, I do use the chat function, but I'm more of an emoji person. If it's just a quick reaction of, oh, that was really great, really excited for those numbers, then emojis are the way to go. Unless I have something super interesting to add, I don't. But I love that challenge for yourself. I might adopt that.
So 2 other things about video calls, and this we've covered, actually we've covered in office hours of Hello Monday before, but it can be really empowering too to see less of yourself. You know, whenever I'm on screen in a meeting, I spend way too much time looking at myself and thinking about how is everybody else seeing me? When truthfully, like everybody else is barely seeing me and they're not seeing me as much as I'm seeing myself. So one thing I always try to do is just turn off the self-view feature, which is very easy to do in every software that I've used, in Teams, in WebEx, in Zoom, in Blue Jeans, RIP, all of them.
It makes such a difference too. Not being able, I feel like it's natural to be a little bit self-conscious or even just self-aware, and just Xing that out is so nice.
Okay, so Ryan has something that I want to hear more about, which is, and now it's flown up the stream.
I've got it.
Okay. So what is this? A meeting pledge slide with 5 tenets of how we want to be hosting inclusive meetings. Let's hear what those are. I'm really curious. And generally, I love it when an organization is so intentional about its culture that it announces the rules for interacting at the beginning of a meeting. I think that is a really strong sign.
David has an interesting counterpoint to using the chat. Michaela, will you grab this?
Sure. I don't like that. It makes split conversation focal points feel like passing notes in class rather than joining the main conversation.
David, I love that you bring that up. I want to stay on that a second, this idea of passing notes in class. When we were in real life, predominantly in my office, we were we were like really on target with not using any other digital devices during meetings. There was the note taker who used the laptop, but other than that, phones were off the table, laptops were closed, and we were head in. And I remember because the first week that I was at LinkedIn, I took a text on my phone during a meeting and my manager pulled me aside, and it was deeply embarrassing for me. But it established the culture. But now we live in a culture where I could be multitasking on the side right this second. So I'm curious, how do we manage multitasking in this environment? Is it actually okay by virtue of the fact that we can't stop it? Do you worry in a different way about not having the attention of the people that you're talking to in a virtual environment?
I think for more formal meetings, bigger meetings, then I am conscious of that. But I think amongst my small team of maybe 5 people, because we're always doing things, I don't feel as terribly if somebody isn't full attention.
I think I'm the opposite. Like if it's a tiny group, I'm like, I got to be right there because you're going to know if my attention drifts and then it will drift anyway. But for larger meetings where I'm like getting a little sense of what's going on, but I don't feel like it is directly applicable, like I'm trying to pay attention. But if something comes up that's time sensitive, I think my habit at this point from home is to like deal with it.
Hey, Andrew has a great comment. Pull it up here. It may be too large to pull up.
It's a pretty good point. What about conversations where juniors have stuff to add, but the seniors are dominating the chat? I've seen it work really well in situations like that, especially in situations with more than 20 stakeholders. Architecture gets big meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is a way to make sure that you're featuring other voices, but then you do have to have cultural norms established around it, because the chat can work a lot of different ways. Like in this conversation, the chat is its own party. Like we're all talking up here and we're reading the chat, but also like Fiona and Ryan are talking to each other in the chat. And that in this context, that's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's the point. Like we're here to hang out with each other. If you were at a party, there'd be a lot of conversations going on, right?
Nicole, I want to grab a couple of comments. So Nicole says, if I'm in a meeting, all other applications are muted and my VoIP is off. I just can't have the distractions. Love that. Kathy says, I don't think multitasking is fair. I agree. It's about paying attention. And when you're ready, we've got those pledge tenants from Ryan. You let me know.
Let's hear.
All right. Our meeting pledge tenants. 1, listen actively, phones down, and be with us. 2, echo and attribute good ideas. 3, encourage and support participation. 4, be aware, use inclusive language. 5, ask questions, change respectfully. 6, be an ally. These are fantastic.
I know. I think we may want to like take them for LinkedIn's podcast initiatives.
Can we we'll attribute?
Maybe
borrow. Maybe use them as inspiration.
So much of what we're talking about, and Ryan's tenants made me think about this. So much of what we're talking about when we're talking about digital body language is really clear communication. And I think that there are ways in which we can shorthand communication when we're together in real life, that we have to be more intentional about and specific about when we're not together. But here's the thing, together or not together, our work works better when we are more intentional and specific in our attempt to communicate with each other. And so that's one thing that really got me about this week's episode is, what we're talking about here is just really clearly communicating.
Emily has a trick or a tip. I deliberately take notes with pencil and paper as a means to prevent my own multitasking twitch. I think that's such a good idea. I do that sometimes. I have a specific pen and a specific notebook that I sometimes do that with, especially when I'm trying, and I'll tell somebody, hey, I'm paying attention, but I'm taking, I'll show my notebook. So that nobody feels like I'm disengaged.
Which is so interesting because if you were in person, you would not feel the need to do that. I'm just taking notes.
But then in that context, you could totally see that somebody was doing that. And here, because of the limited field of vision, we have to announce it.
Hey, I just want to say, this particular episode of Hello Monday, it really resonated with people. I would say I actually thought it would be an important episode, but the response we got on LinkedIn was much more effusive than I even guessed that it would be. And it suggests to me that this is a real pain point for people. And so I just would love to know where we go from here, whether there is a similar or adjacent pain point that we should be tackling on the show. So we've talked about digital body language. What are the other ways of working that people want coaching on right now that we should actively go out and seek coaches to talk to us about? It's going to take a moment for people to fill that in, and we should think a little bit about that. We should throw up some ideas on that.
Welcoming people into an office culture when the office culture is hybrid is something I think about.
Yeah. How do you going forward navigate meetings in which say 20% of the people are in a room and 80% are on computer screens. That feels very challenging to me. I haven't seen that dynamic done well in my own office yet.
Let's see
Got
here.
a lot up here.
Go for it. Let's see. How culture is not resigned to four walls in the office any longer. Transformation to another role. Somebody said, Nicole says, I think people are going to need lessons on making eye contact.
Well, yeah.
Keep them coming in.
I want to go back to that culture one a second, because I think about that a lot. How do we manufacture culture when we're not acting it out for each other every day in person? I think that it comes down, I think, in part to clear communication, but also I think there's a lot that I don't know about that I'd like to know about that. So if you can think of people who should be talking about that, that would be something I would love to think about an episode on.
Let's see here. Conflict resolution when the majority of talk is in messenger threads.
Ooh.
That's really great.
Yeah. I mean, and forget just thinking about that as applied to the office. I think that we need to think about that as applied to life more broadly right now. And I'd love to learn more about how we begin.
So keep these coming. Like, what other areas would you like to see coaching in? Who can we bring to Hello Monday? I want to go up and grab something that Ryan said, responding to Andrew's call out. The use of co-hosts helps ensure that other voices, not always heard, get their time and insights shared. Have someone run the meeting, have someone oversee the chat box, and then get things to the meeting facilitator.
That's a really interesting idea.
That's really smart.
Idea.
Yeah.
Emily says, I want some lessons on how I am effectively. I didn't realize that meaning and GIFs would be a part of my work life. Neither did I, Emily, and I'm rising to the challenge, but but here's the thing, it's not actually something I want to do. And I think probably a lot of people feel like that, like, okay, deep breath. Like, there's no going backward here. We can only go forward. You know, I'm sure there are many, many people who embrace this and it feels second nature to them. But for me, like, I'm not proficient in this, and it's needing to learn another language for me.
Yeah.
Folks, we're in our last 5 minutes, and so I want to do what we always do in our last 5 minutes and switch to what I think of as Hello Monday's most important 5 minutes of the week. Sarah, Michaela, you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
It's time for our gratitudes. So if you are just tuning in, this is your first time to office hours, welcome. Please check out the show, Hello Monday with Jessi Hempel. It drops on Mondays anywhere you listen to podcasts. And also, thanks for being with us in community. And we want to take a few minutes right now for you to think of one thing that you're grateful for this past week and drop it in the chain. We're going to give a few minutes to let that populate. It can be one word or a phrase. It can be itty bitty or something really substantial. Let's just bring our minds there. And I'm going to start by putting Michaela on the spot.
Sure. I'll go with Mary. This is a lady I've been driving around during my weekends. I mentioned to Sarah my Ride Connect connection. So I drive around the elderly on the weekends wherever they need to go. And this weekend we were able to go to the library and get some food and just chat. And it was really great to get her perspectives and meet someone new.
It's really awesome, Michaela. But you, Sarah?
Sarah.
I'm grateful for friends. On Sunday, my spouse and I spent like the whole day with a couple that we're friends with, and like indoors, outdoors, walking around, talking, seeing a movie. And it was so restorative. It was an experience I realized we haven't had probably in over 2 years like that. And it brought me back to myself.
Yeah, that's a great one. I'm grateful for travel. I booked a plane ticket somewhere this week, and I just did not take it for granted that I could do that and that I could do it safely, and I'm excited to travel again. And we've got a lot of things coming into the screen. Let's see.
This is Nicole.
Grateful for being busy and productive. Grateful for dreams. Yes, dreams. Kathy, love. Grateful for reading and good books with my kids. Viana says, Viana, you're talking. Ryan.
Viana says, catching up with friends over lunch.
Mm,
And also
Kelly
wine. Wine is going to come soon.
always wine. Kelly says health, and Kelly, that was almost mine. I'm glad you put it there. My kids are sick again, so whenever there's health, I'm grateful for it. Deborah says grateful for those in my long-term community who have reached out again to reconnect, feeling like no time has passed since our last deep conversation. I love that
Very
feeling.
special.
I
Yeah.
love that feeling. Marlena says Sunday family day. I cook for all.
Esther,
You go. You take it, Sarah.
laser eye surgery. All savings on glasses will go on Louboutins. Love it.
Andrew, Instapot applesauce and 4 p.m. walks. Both really great, particularly in Rochester, where I'm sure it's already dark by 4 p.m. Michaela, you grab a couple.
David, I'm grateful for my ability to sleep whenever I try to, regardless of the levels of stress or strains. Life looks harder if you can't sleep well. Esther says, grateful for my fulfilling journey as an entrepreneur so far. Congrats, Esther. Marissa says, heat. Yes, the temperature is falling, dropping below freezing level here. Stay warm. Hanan says, to have values and morals. Marlena says, chocolate and wine again with friends. It's been 2 years.
Yeah.
Beth, my health, my clients, flannel sheets, time with friends and family.
Folks, it's been such a pleasure to be with you for office hours once again this week. Look, next week we are not here because next week it's going to be Thanksgiving here in the United States. And we hope that next Wednesday afternoon around this time, if you celebrate Thanksgiving, and frankly, even if you don't, you are somewhere baking pies and getting ready. And that you get to have the meal in the company of people that you want to be with, whoever those people are for you. And we will be back next week. No, not next, week after next, with a brand new office hours for you.
Yep.
Sarah?
Monday's episode is a rerun, much requested, The Great Resignation. So let us know what you think, how it resonates with you hearing it now in the fall, as we're seeing like a second sweep of people leaving jobs.
Yep.
Drop us a line at hellomonday@linkedin.com. We will see them when we come back from the holiday, and we're always so happy to hear from you.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. It's great to be together.